And it has to allow you to communicate with your other crew members. So every subsystem you think of in a normal spacecraft exists in a spacesuit.
One of the most complex problems is how to provide astronauts with enough oxygen over a long period outside the station. So with oxygen in limited supply, how can engineers provide life support for astronauts on a 6 to 8 hour spacewalk?
When we breathe, we convert oxygen into carbon dioxide. But not all of the oxygen that we breathe in is converted. In fact, about 75% of that oxygen remains in the air that we exhale. Now, Flus's idea was to recycle our breath, filtering out the carbon dioxide and topping up the oxygen.
The basic principle of his design can be seen on this Flus-inspired breathing apparatus, once used by firefighters.
When they exhale, the gas would pass through this tube and down into the scrubber bag here. And this is where the carbon dioxide is removed. The gas would then pass up through this valve where the oxygen levels are topped up using this tank of oxygen that's on my back. And the air then passes into this chamber where it mixes before then passing back up to the mouthpiece to give the makeup air for the diver. And this is called a rebreather. And it allows divers to safely use all of the oxygen in the air rather than just a small proportion of it.
Back at NASA, the team have used the engineering behind Flus's invention to create a one-person spacecraft.
This is the NASA EMU, or Extravehicular Mobility Unit. It's what astronauts use on the International Space Station when they do a spacewalk. The NASA spacesuit has life support backpack, that's on the back. It has a helmet. The helmet has various visors and various sunscreens to allow use in all environments, dark or bright. The crew member has a display and control module. Here, this is where the crew member interfaces with the spacesuit.
Like Flus's rebreather, the primary life support system worn on the back provides breathable air. A centrifugal fan draws exhaled breath into the unit. Carbon dioxide is filtered, humidity is removed before more oxygen is added and fed back into the helmet. In all, a supplement of only 1.2 pounds of oxygen is needed for an 8-hour spacewalk. Before each spacewalk, astronauts must breathe pure oxygen for several hours, ridding their bodies of nitrogen that alters at low pressure. Once conditioned, they're ready to depressurize and go outside. But leaving the station, as flight operations engineer Aaron Decker knows only too well, is far from straightforward.
You can imagine if you just opened up a hatch, all the atmosphere in the space station is going to go out into space. So we need the ability to break off just a small volume so the astronauts can go outside and we don't waste all of the atmosphere that's in the rest of the space station.
So how do you maintain the pressure inside the station, but allow the astronauts to walk outside? The team at NASA need to call on another great innovator from the past.
This is amazing.
Physicist Andrew Steele has come to the top of the Eiffel Tower to discover the engineering secret behind this iconic marvel.
But actually, although this is a great view of Paris, it's not what's up here that we're interested in looking at. Work on the tower's foundations began on the 28th of January 1887. And for the south and the east towers, the conditions of the ground were perfect.
Compact clay and gravel provided solid support, but the ground under the north and west towers nearest the River Seine was far from ideal.
The Seine caused Eiffel problems because it meant that the ground where the foundations were going to be dug on this side of the tower was waterlogged. If Eiffel's tower was going to get built, they'd need to find a way to dig through that waterlogged soil to the solid bedrock beneath.
To prevent water flooding his excavations, Eiffel turned to celebrated French mining engineer Jacques Triget. Working from earlier patents, Triget had designed a cunning pressurized tube system that stopped groundwater flooding a working mine shaft.
So imagine that this tank represents that waterlogged ground. Obviously we can see it's not really working out very well here for our little worker Claude. So what we need is this thing, which represents Triguer's tube. And just pop that into the water there. It's got a little hole in the bottom which you can poke through, but you can see so far, not much use, he's still very much under the water. So what we need to do is increase the pressure inside that bottle and force the water out. And I'm just going to do that by blowing. Oh, there we go. And as long as I keep my thumb safely over the end here, then that pressurised air stays in there and forces that water to stay outside the bottle. But we very quickly encounter a problem, because once he's finished with that pickaxe and wants to go home and have his dinner, how is he going to get out of this bottle? Well, let's imagine that he wants to come out of the tube. Then we open it up. Oh no. Poor little guy. The water level just comes back up to where it was, and I think he's drowned. So obviously what we need is some kind of mechanism that can allow him to leave that chamber without changing the pressure. That thing was called a pressure box, and these days we'd call it an airlock.
To leave the working chamber, the central chamber was pressurised to the same atmosphere. Workers then entered the central chamber, which was gradually depressurised to normal atmosphere. They could then open a second door leading outside. To enter, the process was simply reversed. Triguer's revolutionary metal boxes or pneumatic caissons worked at the Eiffel Tower with great success. At the Johnson Space Center in Houston, NASA engineers have given Triguer's airlocks a 21st century makeover.
This is the joint airlock module on the International Space Station. This module gives us the ability to go out and do a spacewalk.
Measuring over 5 meters long and 4 meters wide, the airlock is the astronauts' doorway into the vacuum of space.
So in here we're looking at the equipment lock. So this is the volume where the astronauts will suit up, and then when they're finished getting ready, they'll go into this volume here, which is the crew lock. And then we close this hatch, and that allows us to depressurize the crew lock portion to vacuum. When the astronauts step outside and perform a spacewalk for the first time, it's an outstanding feeling, because we've spent months, sometimes years, training these crew members, and we've seen them from beginners work all the way up to becoming experts, and it's just a great feeling.
It's a feeling Tim Peake is familiar with.
For a rookie spacewalker, it's probably the moment of most apprehension, when you know that you're losing all the air from the space around you. And for me, when Tim Copra then opened the hatch and the sunlight kind of flooded in, that was the best moment, because I was so ready to go outside and get to work and start this spacewalk. It was wonderful.
Just watch the lines as you come out. Yeah.
And once outside, it was worth the wait.
All right, gentlemen, looking great. Glad to see you both out there together on the tip of the world. Spectacular.
Every spacewalker gets a few minutes just to adapt to that new environment at the beginning of a spacewalk.
All safety covers look clear.
Great news. Thanks, Tim.
For me, that was a wonderful opportunity, just look down at planet Earth, and that was just wonderful to be able to see.